Hello, my name is Nicholas Doerner, and today I'll be presenting the Great Casino Heist, key takeaways from my first big social engineering engagement. A little bit about me. Currently, I'm a consultant at TrustedSec. The engagement I'll be speaking about today, though, is from when I was employed at Angelin. They're a small cybersecurity firm located out of upstate New York. I have 4 years in information security, avid gamer, and you can find me on Twitter at any time at @the_laughing_man. So you want to break into a casino legally. There's a few things that you want to take into consideration beforehand, and we're going to cover those really quick, but rules, rules, rules. This includes your rules and engagements, anything that may come from a client about what's off limits, what's in scope, out of scope, any special procedures that they want taken with anything. These are extremely important just because you want to make sure that you're following everything pretty much to the T from a client standpoint, so that the relationship is positive and also one that's not going to land you in any type of trouble if something negative happens or you get caught, or there's something that may happen in between that's otherwise going to land you in some hot water. Documentation is key, and documentation is king, especially with these types of engagements where you're doing some sort of physical or anything on site, because when you look at it, you're going to want pictures, notes, names, and locations. When you're doing something like, say, an external penetration test, you can always kind of go back and look at that. You can, if you visited an exploited website and you might need a URL, you can check that URL later on. When you're doing something physically and you're on site and you're trying to break into either a building or an organization, you might not get that luxury of being able to go back and revisit areas. So you really want to take very, very detailed documentation whenever possible, and make sure that everything's there, so that when it comes to report time and debrief or presentation time with your client, everything's ready to go and all set. And lastly, signatures. Signatures are huge, especially if you're doing anything physical and you got that little get out of jail free card. You want to make sure that's properly signed and set up and ready to go. And these are things that I've learned not only on this engagement I'll be speaking about, but other engagements as well. Making sure all those signatures are in place and they're signed by the proper people with the proper authority. They're really going to be huge, especially for making sure that one, you're successful, but two, if there are any failure points, that they're ones that don't land you in a really negative situation. So the steps taken for this engagement, they're pretty standard. We did some information gathering, we set up our pretexts, and then went to an execution phase. And what I really like is with this specific client, they wanted us to go in and start in a top-down approach. So take our OSINT, apply it to vishing, apply anything from vishing to phishing, apply anything from vishing, phishing, and OSINT all the way into physical. So we were able to basically go in and have almost a free reign of how we wanted to do things, with a few minor rules that we'll get into a little bit later. But looking at it, what we were able to do is take all of our previous findings and apply those to the next step. And we'll see that's what led us to some major successes and big wins throughout this engagement. So OSINT, some key takeaways from the OSINT that we had on this one. Social media was a really big one for us. We searched Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. Specifically LinkedIn, we got a lot of names in there that were really useful. It's great when organizations have a large LinkedIn presence from a intelligence gathering standpoint, because that allows you to know who you're dealing with, what position they might work in, who they may have contact with on a daily basis, and what exactly you're going to be looking for when you're inside the organization. Facebook and Twitter, these were really good for finding not only layouts about the organization, we did find some employee photos as well. We also were able to see, especially with somewhere like a casino, they're going to usually have some sort of social media presence, especially if it's a casino and resort, because they're going to be posting, famous singers are coming, or magicians, or whatever they may be doing event-wise, are going to be posted well in advance, and you can usually use that to your advantage some way if you want to incorporate that into your pretext. One other thing that we went after really hard that had a huge payoff, and we have a slide on the next, a picture on the next slide for it, is the target website. A lot of target websites will have layouts, especially with the buildings being casino based and entertainment based. They show, here's how you get from point A to point B. This is where different areas of interest are located. They may not have a full building blueprint or anything along those lines, but they have enough where you can kind of work your way through and kind of work out where things are located if you've never been there before. One subset to that website is going to be the careers page. I've checked a few different casino websites in my time outside of just this one, and a lot of them have careers pages that have pictures of all the employees. They have their badges on, and we see that in the next slide, is that on the careers page, you get a really good sense of how you should be dressing, what a badge layout's going to look like, what you should be wearing, what kind of orientation most things are. Is the badge usually on the left? Is usually on the right? Is there usually a logo on there? What exactly are the small nuances? It's the very small details that are located in these images that you can use to further your pretext and your social engineering engagements. Lastly was Google Maps. Even though this specific casino and resort was relatively small, it was still big enough to have quite a large area to drive and walk through, to the point where Google Maps was kind of crucial in figuring out which building was which, understanding which one was the main casino, which one were some offices that they had to decide, which ones might have been for the pool area on the golf course, things like that. So right here we have a really good example of the careers page. This is a picture from my local casino. This is not a casino I've ever worked for in the past before, but I just jumped on there for this presentation and grabbed this real quick. If we look here, this is from their own careers page. We've got 2 staff members here. We've got a pretty good idea of what one of the small badges looks like, just the little one right there on his shoulder area. And we've also got one that looks like it's a more standard badge, kind of like the one that I had used, that's got your staff ID photo taken, your name, what you're doing, and possibly what role and position you're in, maybe a phone number, an employee ID number, something like that as well. And this is really good because you can see what color shirt should I be wearing, what kind of pants should I wear, do I need to wear a full suit, do I need a blazer, do I need what other parts do I need to kind of make my ensemble look the part, especially if I'm trying to go in under the guise in the physical, which we did in this case, of trying to be an employee, of I'm impersonating someone who's supposed to be here, who works here. I'm just another person trying to get their job done, so hopefully I won't be bothered. Going from OSINT, we went right into vishing, and vishing was a complete and total failure for us. We went in and we ended up taking a bunch of phone numbers that were provided by the client, because those were the only ones that they allowed us to use that were in scope. And the issue that we ended up running into is we did not prepare enough for this specific part of vishing. The pretext was pretty solid, but it turns out all the employees sat next to each other in the same room. So with that in mind, we call Jane Doe first and we get a little bit of information. Then we call John Doe, who sits right next to her, and then they start to talk, and that information spreads really quickly, especially in a small room where everybody knows each other, is kind of tight knit. And before you know it, we get 3 or 4 calls down the line, and the target goes, and I quote, "Get a real job and stop scamming people," and click. And it's okay. Cover's blown at that point. We can't do any more for this engagement. We didn't get a whole ton because we got shut down only a few calls in, but hey, we still got something. We have some stuff that we can provide the client. It also shows them that they do have some strengths in some areas, where if someone were just to go down their phone tree or their phone list and start calling every single person they could, or every single extension, luckily they're very good at communicating amongst themselves. Phishing was a much higher success rate. We were allowed to phish the entire organization. We were allowed to go for whoever we wanted. We did a pretext to enter a raffle for a little giveaway. There's some reason, a lot of organizations that I've gone after in the past, if you do raffles and giveaways and enter to wins, people love it. You see an email for free pizza, you click it. Think about even now. Information security with our conferences. A lot of the conferences have been virtual the last few years with everything going on. So a lot of the swag and a lot of the stickers and a lot of the shirts. You go out there, a lot of people in information security and in infosec are pretty paranoid. But if you tell them, hey, we're gonna give you some free shirts or a sticker or a swag bag, they're pretty you're pretty fast to put the home address in there and ask, okay, yeah, here we go. Here's my name, here's my address. Go ahead, send that right in. So with that giveaway, we had a 42% capture rate, approximately. That's rounded up to the nearest percent. We were allowed also to go after the C-level executives, so we were able to go over CFO, CEO, and related areas. And usually these are ones that are generally either off limits or they're ones that you are very careful with, because no CEO, no CFO wants to get called out as failing a phishing test. So with that in mind, you got to be a little bit careful with those, especially when you're working on client relationships outside of just doing the engagement. But that is one that we were explicitly told was allowed and we were able to do. And just a quick big shout out to GoFish. There's plenty of talks and videos out there on how to use it, but this by far my favorite tool for phishing. It just does so much in so little setup and so little maintenance to use. And it's really a great tool if anyone's looking to expand their tool set or their toolkit with phishing. That's definitely a really good place that I highly recommend to go into. So with the physical, you'll see right here, we actually have this the ID that I used. We can see I put in the same picture. That's the most professional picture I own of myself. On that ID, I gave myself a fake employee number. I did redact some of the information from here just for the client's sake, and I gave myself my regular name. I didn't mind that much, and I also gave myself a role of IT administrator. One of the things that I've learned from this engagement and from others is that if you say you're from IT and you're working at the organization and you tell someone you want to get behind the computer for whatever reason, if you generally play the part well, they're going to let you in there quite a few times. A large percentage of the time, they're like, oh yeah, I don't want to deal with that. You're gonna fix the internet, make it faster? Great, go on behind the keyboard. So some of the rules that we did have with the physical though: no accessing cash rooms. The client was very clear. They didn't want anybody going into the cash rooms, not into the casino vault. They didn't want us anywhere where money was being handled. And completely understandable too. As much as I would have loved to jump into the vault and try to take money out and try to go full, Ocean's 11 on it, it's something that you need to adhere to, especially when it's a client request and the client's the one that essentially is calling the shots. One of the things that I also did was I called myself an intern while I was there. I know the badge says IT administrator, but if somebody would question, hey, I've never recognized you, the IT team's relatively small, it's only a dozen or so people, and I've never seen you here before, how are you in IT? Saying that I was an intern was pretty good. It got me a lot of success, especially in this specific organization, especially because this was about 3.5 years ago now. So with this organization, I looked a little bit younger than I do now, and I already hope I look relatively young. But they would accept that pretty easily and allow me right through. And one other thing just to note on is we didn't do any fancy toys with this. I love the Proxmark. I love doing badge cloning and everything like that. Everything that I did, completely low tech. We have the badge here. It's just a chunk of plastic that we cut to shape and printed on using a printer. No cloning, no type of attacks against any of the scanners or anything along those lines. The most high-tech thing I had was my phone, and that was mainly for sitting outside of doors pretending I'm on a call of some sort until somebody would walk in and out so I don't look suspicious on security cameras, or as suspicious, I would say. And the other major component I had was the clipboard. The clipboard was huge. Dressing in a full suit with a badge just like this, I was wearing the same exact clothes that you see in the picture there, so full suit with a tie and a clipboard, and the badge is just, it got me just about everywhere. People would hold open doors. People were extremely nice, and especially in these types of industries like casinos, where it's essentially a customer service and a service industry, where the staff are generally trained to help people and go out of their way to make sure that they're having a good time. Sometimes that extends into the workplace to a point where they might be a little too helpful. They're holding doors open for people they may not know, just letting them walk right through without scanning in. No one shutting the door behind them with the swipe in, swipe out. They're letting everyone who's in that kind of line to get in through the door, and into whatever areas they're going to for work. And that proved to be a very large downfall for this client. So as far as our findings go, how do you pull off a casino heist if you don't have access to the vaults or the cash room because it's out of scope? For me specifically, we did that because we had first off, we did have full access to every area, aside from those ones that were off limits. So that's why we got our little disclaimer there. But we were able to get into, say, training rooms, office spaces, the server rooms, the power room, and electrical. We could have turned off all the power, which would have been interesting because they had their own power supply. But really, one of the things that we were able to physically steal were iPads from the training room. I think I walked out with about 10 iPads in my bag by the end of that. But it turns out that we were able to find a flaw in their business center, which was also located on site. Just going and sitting down in the business center, which most casinos and resorts have, most hotels have as well. We were able to log in with the credentials from the CFO that I mentioned we captured during the phishing engagement. And using those credentials brought me in to a standard desktop screen. They had some desktop icons that allowed me to then essentially just double click and opens up my mail and go, okay, great. I'm the CFO. Let me log in. Credentials worked great. From there, we were able to see, hey, the CFO has been getting emails from a bank. Let's take a look at that. And it was showing all the transfers because the CFO's account was the one that was being used for all transfers of large money transactions. So at the casino, at the end of every week, every 2 weeks, every month, or whatever time interval, they were essentially depositing millions and millions of dollars to their bank, which, that makes sense. They're not going to keep it all in cash all the time. But since I had access to the CFO's internal account using those credentials that we were able to pick up from phishing, I could, reroute that money if I wanted to. I can go in and make it, lock him out of the account, or I can be a little more stealthy and try to siphon as much funds as I can off before anybody notices and logs in and sees those strange transactions. So there's a lot of things that we can do with that access. And essentially at that point, are we going to do a smash and grab and try to take that money and run? Or are we going to try to do it somewhat slower and take off whatever money we need? Because in the long run, any threat that's going to target a casino may not be after that big payday of, all of the money at the casino. Realistically, you can live quite comfortably off of just taking some of the money from the casino, especially medium, even smaller casinos, where their transactions are equaling on a daily basis several $million quite easily. So getting that money and getting out was really our goal. It was the goal set forth by the client, and we were able to demonstrate that we could do that without access to the cash rooms or the vault because of security flaws that were, one, in the network, but also because of the ways that we weren't shut down. Even though we were shut down in the vishing portion, our OSINT gave us enough that we were able to conduct a fairly successful phishing campaign, and we were able to conduct a very successful physical campaign against the organization and essentially get in, find a way to access an account that we otherwise shouldn't have been able to get into, and get out. And those were really a lot of the really high points that allowed us to get these findings and then exfiltrate without the client really knowing what hit them, essentially. We did do a full stop at the bank account access. We didn't actually try to transfer funds out. As per our agreement, we would not actually steal anything and not return it. Taking transactions out through a bank account is just too messy. It's full stop right there once you have access. iPads are much easier. We can go back at the end of the day and say, here's all of your iPads back. Sorry. So key takeaways here. And a lot of these are really learned the hard way for me, especially in this engagement. For one, the hardest one to learn would have been preparation is key. Vishing really went kind of rough because we were just not as prepared as we should have been when you look at it from a large scale perspective. We should have known better that those employees were located in the same room together. We should have better understood how they would have reacted to the vishing ploy that we were using when we were trying to get information from them, and that just kind of led to a deterioration in that test as a whole. Another part is phishing is great, but and that's not knocking phishing at all. I love phishing. Phishing is one of my favorite things. I think it shows a really high business impact, especially when you do it well and it's not reported. But when you can couple phishing with something else like physical, or you can couple phishing with an internal or an external penetration, red team or penetration test engagement, depending on how you conduct them, phishing is great, but phishing is even better when you can then demonstrate how it can be used for business impact. The other key takeaway is dress the part. Had I not been wearing that suit, and the client told us this during the debrief because the CEO had never met me before, and he was at the debrief and he said, "Hey, yeah, I saw you, and I recognize you from when you were doing the physical testing. We actually walked by each other a few times. The reason I didn't stop you was you were in a full suit. You had the clipboard. You were kind of just going straight out where you were going. You weren't really wandering, and you just looked like you needed to go get something done. So I just wasn't going to bother you or get in the way." And for me, that was a really big key takeaway. Is dressing the part is really a huge asset when it comes to doing physicals and trying to heist a casino. Because if you look the part and you look like you're supposed to be there and you just kind of blend in, no one really questions what exactly you're doing or why. Another part, act confident. Even if you're not confident, I was a bundle of nerves that entire engagement. That was, like I said, my first big social engineering engagement. Vishing and phishing I had done plenty of times before. As far as physical goes, that was among one of my first few. And going in there and being able to steal information or steal physical devices and try to get into places I shouldn't be, your heart's kind of thumping. You got to kind of go back to kind of almost a high school theater or play type of moment where you may be nervous up on that stage, but you're playing a part. You're essentially acting and trying to get into a place that you shouldn't be, instead of just being up on stage in front of a crowd. So that's really important to me, is being able to act confident and be confident, and kind of, even if you have to trick yourself into that mindset, making sure that that's the case. And then lastly, clipboards just work. I don't know what it is, but every time I go out with a clipboard and I've got a piece of paper on it and a pen, people tend to just leave you alone if you got a clipboard. It looks like you're writing stuff down and just trying to get something done. So that's I'm sure there's other talks that touch on that, but that's just a really big thing that people let you get away with. So now hopefully there's enough time for questions at the end of this presentation. If I'm not able to get to you in the questions or the live QA, feel free to reach out to me anytime at Twitter at The Laughing Man, or you can go to The Laughing Man in the Trusted Sec Discord. You can find me in there, and I should also be in the conference Discord under the same name. So thank you, and have a nice conference.